fellow citizens. The peaceful transfer of authority is rare in history, yet common in our country. With a simple oath, we affirm old traditions and make new beginnings. It is a story of a new world that became a friend and liberator of the old. We have a long way yet to travel.
Allegations of improprieties involving thousands of ballots, especially in Palm Beach County.
Support Florida law! Support Florida law!
I'm not sure which one I voted for now.
What they're doing now is illegal and a lie.
Let's go back to Palm Beach County and what's happening there.
The early call that Vice President Gore had won Florida's 25 electoral votes.
This race is simply too close to call.
A long night ahead of a high-stakes political chess game.
It was extremely close in the polls.
I realized there was a problem.
I believe I lost my vote. Quote, I lost my vote.
There's something wrong with the ballots here.
What the networks give us, the networks take us away. NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's column.
All of a sudden, oh, it's going to Bush, and now we can't predict it.
They either are Gore or Bush.
I thought it was confusing.
I had gone to bed thinking that George Bush had been elected.
Several legislators walked in the office saying that we have a problem.
Someone else got my vote.
They want the right vote cast. That's all they're asking for.
And then the phone started ringing.
It was like a perfect storm for an election.
West Palm Beach, laughing stock of the world!
19,000 votes are just trashed.
I want Bush to be president, but it needs to be legitimate.
Every vote counts.
I think I was misled.
It's too close.
How long did the death threats continue for? Years.
And sometimes our differences run so deep, it seems we share a continent, but not a country.
Arguments before Florida's Supreme Court.
Shall immediately begin a manual recount.
I mean, this thing is just a disaster.
They're recounting, they're doing this, they're doing that.
The hanging Chad thing was, you know, in the one famous picture of the guy looking with a huge eye through the magnifying glass.
The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm. God bless you all, and God bless America.
The 2000 election, an event that shaped the future of our country, making Palm Beach County the epicenter of national drama.
Here and across Florida, we saw weeks of recounts, legal battles, protests, and even death threats. The fallout would have major impacts on elections in the future.
25 years later, we peel back the layers of that tumultuous election that reshaped history, and for 36 days left our nation and the presidency hanging in the balance.
The year 2000 was a big, of course, celebration with the turning of the millennium. That was a big deal.
A celebration of both past and future.
We Americans must not fear change.
They start round-the-clock tracking of Y2K glitches around the world.
Y2K, everybody thought the computers were going to shut down.
Lots of people, oh, I see, for the millennium. They're stocking up for the millennium.
The systems are going to collapse because they didn't plan for the year 2000.
Everybody was ready for the world to explode.
They spent millions to make sure the Y2K transition was a smooth one.
Nothing happened.
The internet was really taking over. You had the dot-com stock bubble.
It's probably much worse than we first thought.
E-commerce and all of those things were just starting. I mean, social media really hadn't started yet.
Had over-the-air TV only, no cable. There was no streaming yet. My name is William Miller, and I am a voter in the 2000 election.
Ginger Peterson, and I was born here in Palm Beach County, and I was a voter in the 2000 presidential election.
It was a quiet, somewhat quiet year. It was a presidential year, so we were busy. We had our big elections in the spring. worried about hurricanes during that year too, trying to get ready for the fall elections.
Oh, you got me that time.
You seen it coming? Get ready. The two candidates, people kind of viewed very much the same way. You had George Bush II in a way, you know, George W. Bush, his father had been president, and then you had Al Gore, who was Bill Clinton's vice president. So it was they knew it was going to be a very tight race.
Everything was, you know, quiet until that day, until Election Day.
They checked me in, they handed me my butterfly ballot, they directed me right to a ballot station.
It was just a normal, I'll go vote. People didn't do a lot of mail-in voting or absentee ballots at that time.
I made my selections, and again, on the very first punch, I knew there was going to be an issue.
The controversial voting machines used in the election in Palm Beach County.
An allegedly confusing ballot that held up election 2000.
Was there anything that morning or as you're watching people vote that gave you a hint of what was to come?
Yes and no. When I voted, in my district was Century Village. And after I voted at 7 o'clock, I drove over to Century Village. And at that point, I realized there was a problem.
Drove out to the polls there. And what I found out is that people thought they were voting for Al Gore and actually were voting for Pat Buchanan by mistake because there was something wrong with how the ballot looked in the machine.
I've never seen the mass confusion.
One arrow goes this way, one goes that way, and one goes this way.
I'm not sure which one I voted for now.
You have to read it about 3 times.
Not only was shocked, I was panicked. I started making all kinds of calls. I called the supervisor of elections, I called the Democratic Party. I mean, I called everybody I could think of to say there is something wrong with the ballot.
And the phone started ringing that people said that they thought they made a mistake in voting.
It upsets me very much that someone else got my vote.
There's something strange with the Palm Beach County ballot. And be very careful when you vote because you could possibly vote for the wrong person.
There are serious and substantial irregularities resulting from the ballot used only in one county.
What was happening was they were punching Gore and Lieberman, and they were punching the two, and it happened to be going into Buchanan's.
It would be kind of easy that the holes might confuse somebody.
It's election supervisor Teresa Lepore, the designer of the now infamous butterfly ballot.
She did a very poor job. Did I, in fact, vote for Gore and Lieberman?
Buchanan ended up with 3 times more votes in Palm Beach than in any other county.
But no one in Palm Beach County is for Pat Buchanan.
It was all wrong, and a recount's not going to matter.
I thought that almost immediately it was very poorly designed.
If we tried to squeeze them all on one page, the type style, the font would be very small, and then they'd be complaining because they couldn't read it. So we're just trying to, do the best we can for the voters.
It's a ballot that has been used before in Florida elections. It is a ballot that was approved by an elected Democratic official.
I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people in Palm Beach County who got it right, and they didn't have a problem with it.
You couldn't script a more interesting or dysfunctional scenario.
It would just be a tragedy if the national election is determined by confusion at the ballot box.
Sorry. I'm Teresa Lepore, former supervisor of elections for Palm Beach County and supervisor of elections during the 2000 election.
Tell me about the tears.
Off to vote.
Box, please.
Thank you.
I don't know who I'm voting for in this thing. I mean, I'm punching a hole, and what does it tell me?
I don't know if I voted for him, and I don't know which one I did.
Very confusing.
My vote, I don't believe, was counted.
When you go push the ballot down, it's very confusing. You can get another candidate.
In Palm Beach County, a confusing ballot may have cost Al Gore significant votes.
It appears that more than 20,000 voters in the Palm Beach County, who in all likelihood thought they were voting for Al Gore, had their votes counted for Pat Buchanan or not counted at all.
The fate of the next president may lie in the hands of this supervisor's office.
Voters say the confusion comes from having the punch positions on the ballot for the presidential candidates right next to each other.
So what problem were people having? They were inserting it.
They inserted it into the machine, and apparently they weren't paying attention which hole they were punching, and a lot of them voted for punch the hole where the Buchanan name was instead of Bush or Gore's name, which was around that same area.
It is inconceivable that in a Democratic county like Palm Beach County, that Pat Buchanan would receive 20% of his statewide votes.
I find it hard to believe those are truly my votes.
It seems to me that there could be some confusion, but the arrows do point to where the holes are.
People were confused, which
I'm sorry they were confused, but they need to learn to read.
What made this election different? What made it different for when people voted?
We had a lot of presidential candidates that year, and I had served on several voting assistance committees, trying to make sure that voters with disabilities would have an easy time voting. So I was very cognizant of the size of the print on the ballot. If we would have put all of the candidates on one page, the type font would have been pretty small, which is why we went to what was called the facing page ballot. The media nicknamed it the butterfly ballot. It was called the facing page ballot, where the candidates were on both sides of the page, and then voters would just follow the arrow and vote.
I believe Teresa was doing what she thought was the correct thing to make it easier for senior citizens.
Rather upsetting, a big pit in my stomach when everything started to unravel on election day.
Teresa Lepore, I just think she just took a bum rap for something that probably could have been avoided if other people had looked at it more closely.
She was supported across nonpartisan lines by both Republicans and Democrats as being someone who's always been considered fair.
Sample ballots have been out for weeks, explaining just how the voting process works.
Honestly, I understand that people were confused, but it was sent out to everybody to look at, and we, like I said, had a lot of voter education going on.
Florida remains the key. If, in fact, it goes back into the George Bush column at the end of all this long, confusing tabulation, he's the president-elect. This could not be closer.
It's horrendous to think that such a thing could have happened here.
I knew it would be close, but I didn't think that close.
It's probably something that'll happen once in a lifetime.
This is new territory.
That's entirely possible. Because we've got Tim gets his board out. 565 votes. The Secretary of State is the one who is saying this.
This recount is mandated by Florida law whenever a final ballot puts the margin of victory at less than 1/2%.
Okay, let's see what's in here. Well, one time I had a paper from Japan. I mean, nobody realized that Florida was going to be in the spotlight. I'm Carol Roberts. In 2000, I was the county commissioner in Palm Beach County, Florida.
The canvassing board pressed on with the count.
A canvassing board is a board that's appointed to look at all of the elections when they happen to make sure that the votes are counted properly.
A tedious process conducted in front of the eyes of a nation.
At that time, our chief judge called me, said, I'm going to ask you to do the canvassing board. Don't worry, you just have to work a little late election night.
And it turned into how many days for you?
God, it was, I don't know, was it 40-something days? I don't know. It was a long time. Well, my name is Charles Burton. I'm a circuit judge. Back in 2000, I was chairman of the Palm Beach County Canvassing Board.
The world's eyes have been locked on this board. Judge Charles Burton, Supervisor of Elections Teresa Lepore, and Roberts.
We have a job to do, and our focus is getting that job done, no matter what it takes to get that job done.
Uh-oh, something's happened.
George Bush is the president-elect of the United States. He has won the state of Florida, according to our projections.
About 1:30 in the morning, Fox announced that we had won the election, and we all went pouring out of the headquarters into a chilly, damp evening, stood around the square in front of the state capitol waiting for the Gore concession, which never came.
As if he has actually called George W. Bush and taken back his concession phone call.
I'm Ben Ginsberg. In 2000, I was the national counsel for the Bush-Cheney campaign.
Because of what is at stake, this matter must be resolved expeditiously, but deliberately and without any rush to judgment.
The news got broken that he was withdrawing his concession, at which point our cell phones went off like crazy. We went to the Republican Party of Florida headquarters and set up shop. And that shop soon became, shall we say, overcrowded.
Some groups that were starting to gather people for protest outside. It was mind-boggling that many people materialized within 24 hours, including, that night we had lawyers from all across the country.
There were a sea of attorneys for both camps.
The whole world is now watching to see what happens here.
Make every vote count! Make every vote count! Make every vote count!
America needs to know that something happened here. It didn't pass the smell test of democracy.
Ground Zero, Palm Beach County.
The fate of the 43rd president could boil down to what's called a Chad.
They called it a Chad, but we had no idea what a hanging Chad was.
There's the hanging Chad, which is counted because it's hanging by one corner, but the rest of it is out.
The infamous Chads of Palm Beach County.
There is the swinging door Chad. Now, the swinging door Chad obviously looks like a swinging door because two of the tops are attached and the thing is out.
And then they had this one that was attached by all four corners. And they said, we just don't know what to call it. And I said, it looks pregnant. And of course, most people at that time didn't even know what a Chad was. And so I pretty much introduced the world. That was one of the things I had to do, was to tell people what a Chad was.
So when you cast a vote and you have an old punch system, you punch and a little piece of paper falls out. It looks like confetti. That's called a Chad.
A Chad that is fully attached, bearing only an indentation, should not be counted as a vote.
The first time I punched it, I could feel it didn't punch through.
If people were punching at it and it was a little mark but it didn't come out, that was a dimple Chad. If you punched and it perforated, pushed it out, that was a pregnant Chad. If you punched it and it was partially detached, that was a hanging Chad. And if you punched it and it had come off, but when you put the ballot back in the machine, it kind of reaffixes in a way, that's a dangling Chad. So when you run those ballots through an electronic eye, the eye records the vote when there's a hole. If there's not a complete hole, then it records a no vote. So we know that happened because there were a lot of no votes for presidency or undervotes in Palm Beach County. No one comes out in the presidential election and votes for water management district, but not for the president.
Only ballots that were punched at least 3/4 of the way would be counted.
I've never seen one in my life with a hanging Chad.
The ballots that aren't punched all the way through, they can, see who the person wanted to vote for.
Community leaders are calling for the swift removal of Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections Teresa Lepore.
She did not do a job fair and square.
Harassing phone calls and email.
Death threats from around the country.
She was one of those people that the buck stops here. I was the one in charge of this election. And so if you're going to say something, it reflects on me.
I couldn't believe people would act like that.
How long did the death threats continue for?
Years. It was scary. Security was very, very tight. You had this group, you had that group, media from all around the world showed up. A lot of the times, I don't know if the media ever really knew it, but we had snipers on the roof of the building because of all the stuff that was going on, just in case something happened.
The FBI confiscated about 20,000 of my emails. Most of them were death threats. In answer to your question, yes, I was a little bit alarmed. My husband was more than a little bit alarmed.
This board conduct a manual recount of all the ballots for the presidential election for the year 2000.
You were certainly a lightning rod for both praise and criticism.
Yes.
You have a binding opinion from the Division of Elections.
What happens? Do we go to jail? Because I'm willing to go to jail.
No, I just felt that
Yes, I remember saying that.
Did you ever feel that your personal safety was at risk at any time?
The night of the election, when we started the canvassing board, when I went home about 2 or 3 in the morning, my telephone answering system was blinking itself out of existence. And I started to listen, and almost all of them were death threats from around the country.
She has a sheriff's deputy posted by her side.
I was starting to drive away, and the crowds just surrounded my car and started jumping on the car and acting like animals.
Harassing phone calls and email.
The person who was affected the most was Teresa. She was so stressed about what was going on and she had been getting threats, and she'd been getting terrible phone calls.
Yes, that night when I went into the garage to get my car with the sheriff's escort, all 4 tires had nails in them.
How long did the death threats continue for?
Years, yeah. To this day, I mean, there are things that I do that come from that, like 99.9% of the time I back into a parking place so I can get out easy if I need to. I don't take the same route twice.
Tell me about the tears. Was it because you were so concerned for your safety, or you just couldn't believe that people were doing this?
I couldn't believe people would act like that. And to be honest, if that happened today, I don't know what could have happened with today's climate. I can't even imagine. To be honest with you, I had a job to do, and my focus was on the job, and that was something I could deal with later.
It grew to a huge number of people from all over the world, basically.
I saw some people recounting the votes and everything, and it looked really cool.
And our parents requested the footage of all the election and all the media for Christmas when we go home.
TV reporters lined up for live shots. History in the making.
Here we are. It's a little bit quieter on this morning, but right behind those windows, that's where the election supervisor was working and her entire staff. And this is where you and I were many nights, not only on election night, but nights afterward as well.
Yeah, on election night, I was sent here because I was told that Teresa Lepore was still here. And I remember driving up and looking at the windows, and you could see the lights were on, which was so rare to see at night. About 20 to 25 workers are still there.
You know, the old elections office downtown had these windows. So you're inside and you got people, the camera people outside, media, whoever. You're like sitting in a fishbowl, you know.
And you and I were here many nights afterwards, reporting on the day's events because things changed from hour to hour.
We tried to give as much update as we could, or which took time out of what we were doing because we had to stop everything. Everything inside had to stop, all the counting and everything, when we went outside to talk to the media.
There was almost an unsaid agreement that the people who were, protesting or campaigning for their particular candidate wouldn't bother you while you were doing your live shot. They would be right behind you holding the sign of who they wanted to win, but I don't recall ever being bothered in the middle of a live shot.
No, they were just standing very close with the posters. I can remember a few posters kind of brushing my shoulder or something.
This is where all of the reporters from all over the country and all over the world were set up, right?
Yeah, I remember this was like my spot right here. And we just all stand next to each other, and it would go all the way down the block, down to Dixie Highway. There were so many of us. When we would stand next to each other and report, our elbows would touch because there were so many of us. This is a lot of reporters, and they all were speaking different languages. Some were speaking German, Chinese, Japanese, so many different journalists from all over the world. I just never seen that before. I never knew there were so many journalists.
We have agreed to come out here and do this publicly. We would like to continue to do that.
I don't really miss those days. As I was saying to you earlier, you know, the power of the media, it's pretty amazing. But I'd rather sort of stick to my day job and not have to deal with all that.
As we work to conclude this election, we should be guided by three principles. This process must be fair, this process must be accurate, and this process must be final.
What is at stake here is not who wins and who loses in a contest for the presidency, but how we honor our Constitution and make sure that our democracy works as our founders intended it to work.
Both sides agree the Florida Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court could wind up deciding who won Florida, and thus who won the presidency.
Nothing could have prepared
Please be seated.
the legislature or us for what was about to come in 2000.
Manual recounts being conducted in accordance with 166.
My name is Barbara Pariente, and in the year 2000, I was one of 7 members of the Florida Supreme Court.
Attention, which could be a local prosecutor or just a civil lawsuit.
Yes, my name is Bob Butterworth. During the election, I was the Attorney General of the state of Florida.
Regardless of whether you're winning or losing, it's a matter of Florida law.
David Boies. I was representing Vice President Al Gore.
Of course, I can't talk about internal deliberations, but what I can say is the very first opinion that we issued almost immediately after receiving the lawsuit was unanimous, which was we extended the time for the counting of the ballots.
I think we're going to have to wait and see what the recount, the first phase of this, the recount brings.
The second opinion that was the significant opinion that went up to the United States Supreme Court was one where we had ordered a recount in all the counties where the undervote had not been recorded. That is, votes that had been cast, but the machines had not registered a vote. And the 4-member majority felt that was important to go with the concept that every vote, legitimate vote that was cast should be counted.
The citizens of Florida surely want the candidate who received the most votes in Florida to be determined the winner of that state. That's why I'm very pleased that the hand counts are continuing. They're proceeding despite efforts to obstruct them. And that is why the decision just announced by the Florida Supreme Court, preventing the Florida Secretary of State from certifying the election results tomorrow, is so important.
Like most recounts I had been in, I expected that there would be a few days of intense activity and then it would fade away and it would be pretty obvious that one side or the other won. But of course, it just kept on getting crazier and crazier. We had over 800 people in the state of Florida by the time everything was said and done. Yeah, I mean, there were rulings in federal courts, state courts, county courts. So there were an awful lot of things to juggle, including sort of such basic things as whether individual counties were actually looking at ballots or not. So we had to scramble people not only to handle all the judicial proceedings, of which there were many, but also to staff up the recounts of some of the ballots in the 4 counties.
we were starting to come up against that deadline. And the deadline would mean that if you didn't have your state certify the vote, it might not be able to be counted in Congress.
So when the state Supreme Court says the recount is good, go ahead with the recount, did you think your fight was over at that point?
I thought it was over a couple of times Saturday morning, and by Saturday noon they were through about 40%, 50% of the vote count, and it was clear it was going to get finished in a day or two. And that's when the United States Supreme Court, without hearing the case, 5-4, stopped the vote count.
Out-of-breath reporters scrambled out with the Supreme Court ruling that Florida's hand recount was not just unfair, but unconstitutional. The 5-4 decision says the way ballots were being counted varied too much from county to county, not to mention table to table.
It was pretty clear that politics were going to trump the law.
Do you have a feeling to this day of why the Supreme Court ruled the way it did?
Well, I think that if you look at the 5 Republican justices that ruled the way they did, stopped the vote counting before there'd been a hearing, and then refused to let the Florida Supreme Court continue the vote counting after the Supreme Court decision, I think they were determined to end the process.
It's difficult when you see the Supreme Court basically picked the president, because that's not their job.
I think the Supreme Court was a little hurried, but what they did had to be done. It had to be finished. We had to have an election. We had to have a result.
All the counties were almost finished. They were almost finished, and that's all that had to be done. And all we asked for from day one was count the votes.
The legitimacy of any president that's elected is going to be impaired unless the American people understand that there has been a full and fair count of all the votes.
I think Bush v. Gore was representative both of the best and the worst of our judicial system. It was, I think, a terrible decision that disregarded precedent, disregarded the law. On the other hand, there was a commitment to the rule of law that was so strong that no matter how much people disagreed with the decision, they accepted it and were supportive of the result.
The U.S. Supreme Court said the counting had to stop. Those that were in positions of responsibility stopped. We obeyed the order, and there was a peaceful transition of power.
And my hat's off to Secretary Harris and also, of course, to Jeb Bush. All of us basically did it in a very professional way. We wanted to make sure that with the vote, when it's finally over, is the vote of the people that voted in the state of Florida, period. And whoever wins that vote will be the next president of the United States.
Whoever becomes president, actually the country is going to be the loser, because it's going to be a tainted presidency.
We worked for years on this election. We tried our best to make sure our candidate, whether it be Bush or Gore, wins the election. And here we are. Here we are, supposedly the freest country in the world. And the Supreme Court, by one decision, by one vote, 5-4, decides who our president's going to be. A quarter century afterwards. I just can't believe this. I still can't believe it.
And I think 25 years later, that lesson about the rule of law and the importance of voting remains probably more powerful than ever. For anyone that doesn't think your vote doesn't count, think of the fact that the presidential election in Florida was determined by just a few hundred votes.
and in accordance with the laws of the state of Florida, I hereby declare Governor George W. Bush the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes.
My name is Catherine Harris, and at the time of the 2000 election, I was a statewide elected representative of the cabinet as Secretary of State.
We did have a Republican governor, and she was very anxious to certify George Bush as the winner of that election.
There's several issues about Secretary of State that they got wrong. One, Secretary of State is elected statewide, not appointed. The press kept saying that I owed my allegiance to the Bushes. Not true.
Catherine Harris and the Florida Bush administration to try to cut off the recount before it could be completed.
David Boies said that from the beginning. We need a villain that we can blame. So I became the villain.
That might have been some of the criticism too, and even speculation was the Bush campaign influencing your decisions as Secretary of State.
We said straight up that we would not interact with them. After the first 3 or 4 days, and it was so crazy, I said, no one from either campaign can come in and talk to me. You can speak with the lawyers, but you can't try to influence me. You can't do anything like that at all. So I was kind of really in lockdown. I will credit the Florida Supreme Court with acting egregiously and changing the law.
The Florida Supreme Court, who ultimately determined Florida law, not Catherine Harris.
Bob Butterworth was chairing Al Gore's campaign right across the hall from me. So because Jeb was governor, George Bush's brother was governor, they weren't going to have a chair of the campaign from the cabinet. But 5 of us were given honorary chair titles, but no responsibility. We weren't to raise money, nothing. And we went to a few events, nothing different than we would have anyway.
Right after the election, I obviously went to the campaign chairs and I told them, I am no longer your campaign chair. I am the Attorney General of the state of Florida.
It was 36 days of not only extraordinary legal battles, but really amazing politics, amazing brilliance on both sides. The most important message is that during the election 2000 in the recount, that the Department of State charged with elections strictly followed the law. And we didn't look to the left or the right. And that's all I've ever maintained.
Each state has electors, and they cast their votes winner take all. In the year 2000, we had a doozy of an election. Everything came down to Florida, and in Florida it came down to Palm Beach County. What they did is they had a butterfly ballot. They voted here, they kicked that vote for Gore. That wasn't a vote for Gore. It was a vote for who? Buchanan. Robert Watson, distinguished professor of history. I knew that it was big and it was important. 271 to 266. You can't get closer than that.
Year 2000, were any of you born?
No.
What years were you born?
2004.
What did you think of before today when you thought of that election? Did you know anything about it?
No. Really? No.
I gave my students the butterfly ballot because they were all snickering, old people in Florida. So I gave it to a class of about 30 students and 3 of them messed it up.
I was thinking about how confusing the ballots were.
Yeah.
Like, why did no one think that setup was odd? It just needs to be as simple as possible.
One of the many, many intriguing stories of 2000 is in Palm Beach County, we had undervotes. That means people didn't vote for president. The Gore campaign was suing, saying we need hand recounts. The Bush campaign was suing, saying we don't want recounts. You couldn't script a more interesting or dysfunctional scenario. The U.S. Supreme Court said what? End it. Bush is the winner. So that was the 2000 election.
I definitely don't think we got it right, honestly. Whether it would have come out the same way, I don't know, but I definitely think there's a lot of votes that were never counted. Honestly, it just kind of boils down to me that the Electoral College is really out of date.
And I think it's crazy that because of the overvotes and undervotes, you wouldn't actually know who actually won the 2000 election. Like, it's something that will kind of remain a mystery forever.
Do you think it's important to learn about the 2000 election?
I do. Definitely.
Yeah, why do you think so?
It changes perspectives about voting and about your vote actually counts. Like, it's not the same as everyone thinks, like, oh, it doesn't matter if I go or not. Like, it matters. It does. And I think the 2000 election was the prime example of this.
Voting is better than not voting. It's better to get your opinion out there, even if it doesn't go the way you expect it to go.
I think it doesn't change like the fact that I'm obviously still going to vote, and I do believe my vote counts, but I think like people who don't believe their vote counts, I understand why they would feel that way.
You would have thought from the 2000s to 2025 things might have like changed and grow, but honestly I don't think they have grown that much.
If the 2000 election debacle happened today, I fear there would be riots. I think one of the few positives that come out of the 2000 election was Al Gore's concession speech.
And I call on all Americans, I particularly urge all who stood with us to unite behind our next president.
So let's come together, let's trust the process. He gave what I thought was one of the most civil and respectful concession speeches.
Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it.
The outcome of Florida's contested election would determine the next president.
Counting votes. Did you come up with the time? Who did you have that?
This one I did, because you hope in some way that your words and work just add a teaspoon to this ocean of information out there about we need to be better, we need to do a better job. Florida used to be the big swing state, but over the last couple of years it's become a solidly Republican state. Oops. I have a great amount of trust in our election system, having studied it. Typically the people that rant and scream and say it's fixed, it's broken, it's fraudulent, it's fake, they haven't spent a day studying the system. Virtually every vote that's cast is legitimate. Virtually every vote that's cast is counted.
Is there a lesson that you're trying to impart on them? Again, not politically, one side or the other, but just the importance of the process.
Vote. Your vote matters, your vote counts. There's so many votes in history where 1, 2, 5, 10 votes made the difference in an important election. So your vote does matter.
He's checking to make sure that seal number hasn't been changed. In my view, you don't trust what you can't see. This box has on there how many ballots are in there. We'll then seal the entire cabinet. I am Wendy Sartori-Link. I'm the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections. So I just came in ready to learn from as many people as I could learn from, reading statutes, understanding what we've been through, and how can we take this forward.
So explain to me what's happening in this room.
So this room we do opening of the ballots, tabulation of the ballots, scanning for the audit of the ballots. We'll also do recounts in this room. So everything takes place here. The public needs to be able to trust the process. And in order to do that, they need to see it and they need to understand it. Starts down this corridor, they can look in the windows and see TVs as well with different angles. In this room, it's our canvassing area. They can watch what's happening in the canvassing room. We wanted to make sure the public could come in, feel like they can see everything. So from the canvassing board, all of the public area there, we brought in comfortable chairs, coffee. We try to make it very comfortable for people. They can walk down this whole corridor, look in everywhere that, all along the way. And if they feel like they can't see everything as much as they want, there's cameras everywhere. And so the public can also watch it on TV right as they're looking through the window at the same time. And as we were trying to rebuild Florida and Palm Beach County into an area that people could be proud of voting here and feel good about the results, one of the things we said was we have to change the way we look at everything.
You also have here in the building a history of elections in
Right.
Palm Beach County, and here it is.
Right, we thought it would be important for people to see where we came from. I think I was just looking at it saying, I can't believe that our country is in this a time where we are so uncertain, because that's just not been how it's existed in the past. With 800 precincts, we need to make sure that the right race in every different combination is on the correct precinct ballot. So we set up something that's not required by law, but we invite all the parties and all the candidates to come in and look at the ballot before we make its finalize it. The process is so important because it's what democracy is founded on, is trusting your elections. And if people don't trust the process, they're not going to believe in the outcome. You don't believe in the outcome, bad things can happen.
If you could go back in time, what would you change?
I would have tried to wait another year to get appointed. No, I don't know. Listen, I think a lot of the lawsuits slowed us down. I think, a lot of arguing over, they wanted to put on hearings on whether the punch card thing's getting blocked, and they could, all kinds of stuff that was just a waste of time. I mean, obviously, we would have liked to conclude that recount.
Would you say 2000 was a stolen election in a way?
I would say that probably the 2000 election was, the Supreme Court chose the winners when they told Florida they couldn't continue, the Florida Supreme Court, that they could not continue their charge to look into this, because it was Florida that was going to be the deciding factor. So I do believe it was selected rather than elected. I mean, nobody realized that Florida was going to be in the spotlight. So yes, every vote counts. And if you don't use your right, you may lose it.
I lost a lot of friends during that, or supposed friends. They weren't true friends to begin with. I don't trust anybody. Very, very hard to trust anybody. It's made me stronger. God only gives you what He knows you can handle.
Do you ever look back and think about it at all, or it's in the past?
It's in the past. I've tried writing a book about it. I've got notes and stuff, but it's just too hard, too painful to go back. So it's part of my life. I just kind of, another chapter that's over and done with.
Now the political struggle is over, and we turn again to the unending struggle for the common good of all Americans and for those multitudes around the world who look to us for leadership in the cause of freedom. In the words of our great hymn, America, America, let us crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
I am honored and humbled to stand here where so many of America's leaders have come before me, and so many will follow. We have a place, all of us, in a long story, a story we continue, but whose end we will not see.